3 places while the race were going into Esteban Ocon. Look at the car come farm compared to the George Russell and Kimi Antonelli side of the Mercedes garage. Nothing on going on there. They kept it clean. Russell will be hoping for more than his fifth on the grid for sprint qualifying, and Antonelli certainly hoping for more than 11th than he was on Friday. Let's have a quick look inside the Red Bull Racing garage. They've got to be careful because Max Verstappen said that the car is good over one lap, but not good enough in the race. So they don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, figuratively speaking, because it's good over one lap. So that car tells the third story. Look at Max just there talking to Helmut Marko, who calm and connected under a Texan sun, Simon. Just sums it up with the reigning world champion. Yeah, it's been vintage Max Verstappen for the last 3 race weekends, but I just want to know that actually with regards to what we saw yesterday in the sprint qualifying, any reason to believe there'd be any difference today? Track temperature sort of the same-ish? No, I think maybe the McLaren drivers did look at the last couple of corners and look where they were looking at using out the max and taking a bit more of a risk there. So there's always room for improvement, but I think you're going to be looking at the same top 3, just in which order. And then I think that Max pulled off a really spectacular lap yesterday. It'll probably be McLaren, but they're on the back foot after earlier today. Well, when anyone benefited from the fact that they learned something from everything we've seen in sprint qualifying, we shall see, because we're moments away from actual qualifying. US Grand Prix. So hooking up the perfect qualifying lap. Welcome along then to 60 minutes of qualifying ahead of the 13th US Grand Prix to take place here at the Circuit of the Americas. We're in Texas, we're in Austin, it's round 19 of this Formula One season. In 2025, and the sprint race has been pretty perfect for Max Verstappen so far. Pole position is third win in 3 sprints here. But who's going to take pole for the 56th lap Grand Prix? Who wants pole? 6 different pole sitters in the last 6 US Grand Prix to take place in Austin. But the pole sitter hasn't finished off the podium here since Max won in 2021. 20 corners to come and track temperatures hovering around 48 degrees. So the City Ball, the PD of the C3 are going to be put under a lot of stress over the next hour or so. That run up to turn 1 has already provided plenty of action. To take into the sprint race today, what will qualifying bring us? Martin Brundle alongside me. I'll wait for this one to get going. And what's pole? It's a busy day, isn't it? And a sprint weekend. The championships are not won or lost over one race or one day. But today was a big day, wasn't it, for Verstappen to close that gap by a further 8 points. So all eyes now on qualifying into white and go for the brains of the 2 McLaren drivers. It's a new challenge now, and their best way of defending against Verstappen this year in the remaining races is to stick it on pole and go off and win the race, and they need to try and lock out the front row this afternoon. Why couldn't go make it sound so easy? Is it easy to forget what happened about 3-4 hours ago? You have to. I mean, you've got to know if that plays on your mind, it becomes a double negative. And I think I was unfortunate to come up against and said, like Schumacher and Nick Hakkinen as teammates or main rivals in my career, and I learned, and they were better than me, and I learned the only way to manage them and manage my mind against them was just extra variety. And that's it. Just forget who they are, what you think they're going to do next, and get in and do your best. And sometimes I used to hit rock bottom and come back with nothing to lose. That was my way of surviving it. But these are professional athletes, and they've got to just get in and drive and hit the brakes and drive the apexes and get on with it. That's what they're here to do. That's what they're highly paid to do, and that's what they're extremely good at and have dedicated their lives to doing. Through the words, Ted Kravitz of a great broadcaster, I've had a negative lid, I need 2 positives. 1, 2 outdo the negative, and just 1 so I can have a positive. It's that would mean that McLaren need 3 positives. Don't they? I can't offer them that at the moment, roughly, because they're still working on the cars. Honestly, yes, they are, yeah. So I just thought I just passed them a moment ago on my way to my little spot in between, for this session, just so you know, between the Racing Bulls and the Haas garage onwards. The McLaren cars are still being worked on. We've got a bit more time, haven't we? So it's been, 18-minute session Q1. And while I'm talking about getting my numbers right, roughly, I should correct myself in the words of the great Murray Walker, and interrupt me myself, but while I correct myself, by saying that it's a 5-place penalty for Lance Stroll. I think I erroneously said 3-place penalty. So, sorry about that, Lance. It gets worse for him after that clump together with Esteban Ocon. But, as you can see, they're all lined up at the end of the pit lane. They've been sitting there for a couple of minutes, letting their tyre pressures drop and their temperatures cool. A couple of Ferraris. And I wait to see which McLarens we get and in what order they are going to be in, which I will update you about throughout the session. Thank you very much, Ted. Bit of a keen to get out of the pit, Martin Brundle, and that could become fairly significant towards the end of the first part of qualifying. Certainly for sprint qualifying, it was very significant for 3 cars. They didn't get out in time, didn't make it to the line to start their lap before the checkered flag, and missed out. Absolutely. So Alex Albon has not crossed the white line with his front tyre, so he's not in the queue, but he has got his teammate Carlos Sainz just behind me. Will let him in, of course. So it's a game. You're not allowed to just swan up the inside like you might people doing on the road occasionally, especially those contraflows where everybody queues in one lane. But because that's considered not getting into the fast lane as soon as possible. And you want to get out, you want track evolution, but at the same time, the more cars are in front of you, the more chance you got of getting caught up in a yellow flag situation or an incident in front of you. Red Bull apologising to the Sabota yesterday. There was another of 3 cars. It did make it outside, but while they got brought out though, we're on board with the Red Bull out. And that's Gabriel Bortoletto out big let through, but he ran across the white line, so he could take his place of the canoe. Sounds like bad Spanish, doesn't it? Sitting there because the head cuts the cylinders, so it doesn't obey. The car just keeps running at the end of the pit lane, so back in the day, everyone in the car would have been steaming before that and depositing most of its radiator contents on the ground. I'm surprised about steaming out there. 34 degrees air temperature, 48 degrees correct temperature. The forecast tomorrow is actually to be a bit cooler, 6 degrees. In terms of ambient temperature. The front shade in Kilnick, so is that an issue, or is that less of a help for McLaren if it gets a bit cooler tomorrow? Yeah, I think the temperature, if we watched the race, have been running in it for the first corner, but it does look as if they've still got the talent of preserving their tyres and very long conditions. It does look as if this track should come back to their strength, but why it's been being a for this tomorrow, but such is the high energy need through some of this racetrack. And even if it's 27 Andean, Bolton to the track, well, I still win. It's better than the have a race this week. That's the cooling systems are on the cars, but the wind might be a hazard as well. It's pretty gusty, and it's a bit of a crosswind. Places of the track near so near you're at Hill and Downdale as well. So you protected, you're shielded sometimes, and then on the top of the L9 there, suddenly you're not pinning off, and you've been downhill into the Great Zone Air for turn 11. You've got a tailwind, you've got less downforce, because the car's just not doing the same airspeed as they were. So you have to brake a little bit early, and after you're into a headwind, if they partially are, you can brake late into T12, but it's slightly downhill with the yellow flag out from somebody already. It's a catcher who has stopped and is slapping the steering wheel in frustration, and that's why he stopped. There's no front wing. He's going to the back rears. We've got our first red flag. Some 3 minutes 10 seconds into the session, medical cars have been deployed, which means that the automatic sensor has set off inside the cockpit, and he's hit those barriers with quite some force, and he is absolutely furious with himself. Okay, which is great to see, but to be furious, and for the second time in his Formula 1 career, he's in the first part of qualifying for a Grand Prix. He's hit will not explain by the 25 of course, gravity. Verstappen and Antonelli were still in the pit, so they haven't used any light running out lap of their tyres, so advantage Verstappen and Antonelli in that respect. And as we've seen with Isaac Hadjar before, he gets extremely upset with himself. He was come to a standstill in the barriers at turn 6. My estimation is that if he's gone off there, he might have been doing something in the region of 150 miles an hour as he went off the track. Let's have a quick look and see what happened. And we mentioned that crosswind, which can affect you there. Or I have to drag. But I don't know about it. I feel sorry for Ned because I just broke loose and to do about that. He was on the right side of the track, just the balance of the car, maybe his tyre pressures temperature weren't quite where it needed it. It started to slide and it carried so much speed that I feel sorry for him out there. He was just pushing on stuff we could do. And what happens is you get a certain stiff angle on the tyre, and then the tyre starts giving up grip. And also, when you've got your in the aerodynamic, start using downforce, you've got the engine and gearbox behind you like a pendulum. You get to a certain amount of slide, of slip, of your angle, and it ain't coming back. But once the reds of break out of force and you're off into the barriers, Q3 and Singapore for Isaac Hadjar, which most is on level of the safe bar. But as it was in Monza, knocked out in one. So the field started laps, no one had completed the flying lap, so the early runners have basically pretty much used up tyres, and without having anything to show for it. The McLarens had come out loud by themselves with the athlete. How far have they gone? Zach were out into their lap before the red flag. And I bet so it's straight up the day. That's all right, that's not forward. How long this red flag is? Your points, and Zach, while we're talking to you, you were very kind to come on straight away after the accident in the sprint race. I don't know if you've had a chance to see any replays from that lap one collision, and you still hold the same views. Yeah, I've reviewed it. I think it's my view. I can't really put that on kind of detail. So he ended up obviously pretty glad that I saw there. A lot of accidents to go on, but I don't think there's on detail. How did the cars go back together? I presume he hadn't put new gearboxes on, just the security, did you? Yeah, that's exactly what we did. We changed the back end, but both cars should be on the safe side. I don't think they were damaged, but we didn't want to find out the hard way that maybe they were. What sort of things have you been saying to the drivers, to Lando and to Oscar, after that sprint race? A massive disappointment for the team. Martin says, right, so I'm the wife and going, clean slate and away you go. But how do you do that as a CEO of the team? Yeah, you're exactly right. Better put this on qualifying. Let's learn what happened there, but we can't outride that, unfortunately. So, on the computers, folks, try to keep both cars on the front row and just throw the smoke have the race tomorrow. 30. You're going to get on the front row today, Emily's Zach. Somehow you're going to lock that front row out. That's the game plan, but almost. Thanks ever so much, Zach. We'll be talking to you at the end of this Q1 session, and hopefully at the end of Q2 as well. So clock stops 14 minutes, 51 seconds on that clock. We are still under red flag conditions, even though you can't see it now. It's a yellow flag. Whilst they remove the stricken and racing balls, we haven't got a resumption time yet. We'll let you know as soon as we have one. And in the meantime, great job, Dr. the Skyman. Yeah, thank you, Property. Let's have a look at how he's handled the accident here. So down the hill, slightly up into this fast sequence of corner. And then we can see, look, he's gone left there. Getting quite a lot of understeer, quite a lot of steering off. And then gets into the right-hander, and I think what meant to come, it just broke away from him quite quickly. I think he's got a bump at an odd angle there. It is bumpy, it is tricky, and it just snapped away from him very quickly. And at that point, he's just a passenger heading towards the barrier. But interestingly, yesterday in SQ1, so the first part of sprint qualifying, he had a moment in a similar sort of area. Just watch this. So he's again gone through 3, into 4, into 5, and then had that snap there. But again, the car did just pop about a bit. On that occasion, he bailed out to the right. It was one corner earlier. But I think the car has been pitchy to drive. The wind is better than it was during the race this morning, but it's still gusting. And I think combined with the bumps, it is just pitchy, and on that occasion, a bit too edgy. But I think I just back up the app. So you've got the wind to contend with, the heat to contend with, and the bumps to contend with here as well. Yeah, that's why we're sitting and watching it. It's good. And that's how it should be. You've driven the track quite recently. Bumpy is it from a driver's perspective, and how awkward the others, but it's quite bumpy generally around here, which I don't mind, same for everybody. I don't like billiard table racing circuits. It moves around a little bit year to year. It's quite hard to see. I like breaking into turn 12, so it's quite hard to see because of the movement. And of course, the deep ground effect cars that came in 2022, they run them really low, which means they're pretty stiff on the suspension. So, and that compounds everything. And there are no bushes or rubber joints anywhere. It's just carbon and solid joints. Lots of hands up at the moment. That's not one over. They wanted to consultant was not to take his picture. Everyone is waiting. Now the track is clear. Everyone is waiting for a resumption time. And as soon as we get a resumption time, they're all coming out of the pits as fast as they possibly can. But they don't want to get stuck in traffic. They still want to get into, aren't they? 16-14 resumption time. There you go. Oh, and that, a second of the half after it flashed up on the stage. Well, there it happens. And this is that pain, ladies and gentlemen. We're fighting way in. Well done. We have Lawson and Racing Bulls. He found a nice little gap to feed into. And well done. Who was it at the front of that here? And I think you can see, take your own, I think it might be Carlos Sainz, Edmund Williams. But there was your stat for each day. Yeah, another one. And now there's a little fight by the way, Max Verstappen on used soft tyres. The only one I can see not on new tyres. Max Verstappen. Now you Tsunoda and Gasly, who were previously friends and teammates, are having a little bit of handbag from the pit lane as they're looking in front of the other one. Gasly has just about made it. They all get out there, get their place in the queue, and then as you can tell from the silence in the background, they've shut the ring. At Vegas Sprint Weekend, they're giving one less set of tyres than a normal weekend. It's 12 sets, so they have to be a little bit more parsimonious with them. The acid in the McLarens were out on used soft at they used to because they're with that lovely dull sheen rather than shiny fender. Such a full build-on thing, isn't it? They had over 3 minutes to go to the resumption, and the body filed out into the pit lane, and now they just sit and waiting to get going again. Yeah, I don't know what the alternative is. Of course, what's happening here, of course, is the front-running teams in last year's World Championship are at the beginning of the pit lane there. So it's easier this weekend for the teams that were lower in the championship to actually get the high ground and now into the pit lane for change. You're one of dying fully anti-clockwise circuits on the calendar here in Austin this weekend. It used to be the case that the championship winning team got first dibs on the garages. So could McLaren not have said, "We'll go to the other end of the pit lane, please," or does that then compromise you if there's a safety car pit stop scenario during the Grand Prix? I don't know if the teams can make that decision. If the geography of all the pit lanes and garages are quite dramatically different. I mean, look how wide this pit lane is compared to they've only got one fast lane which they're all sitting in, which is very defined in the regulations. Compare that with Singapore, for example, of Monaco. I mean, yeah. If I would not see there, but even a lot of people, I'm sure they will charge a lot of money from Spirit now as well. Official congratulations to Nico Hulkenberg, the red got out at Sauber, who put his car off on the grid for the sprint race. Lasted about 40 meters of elevation until the contact with Oscar Piastri that then landed into Lando Norris that took out Fernando Alonso with a puncture as well, with lost 4 cars at the opening turn. Now 30 seconds to go, and Lando Norris is right at the back of the queue. And Oscar Piastri decided to sit waiting out for the absolute no point in being out the opener. He really didn't get to the queue anyway, so well, this is what I was talking about. I mean, McDonald's the first driver to be on the hot lap. So the risk you take is if you're ahead of an incident, if it is on as a non-red flag, you can finish that lap without having to lift throttle and attention to single or double wave yellows. Alright, so in back, we had a record 6 red flags in qualifying, which I think lasted something like an hour and 48 minutes. Well done to Karuda and Harry for surviving that one. There were 5 red flags at Imola in 2022, and there were 5 in Sao Paulo in 2024, and I remember that day very well. We've had 1 red flag here so far, and fingers crossed we don't get any more, because the excitement and the action will be exciting enough, I'm sure. It's going to take a little while for that queue to feed out. Hulkenberg, also Lesso, Albon, and Sainz are all on the track. Noticed yesterday in their sprint qualifying that the Team Williams drivers, Albon and Sainz, came out of the pits and didn't get a chance to get round to the line to start their lap. And we did wonder what on earth they were doing going out, but it was quite clear they wouldn't get a lap in. But they were on the track, shall we say, when others were trying to set their lap time. They're not officially a beating, but it was just there to make it a little trickier, and he was upset about that. I think maybe their nearest rivals to the championship, Aston Martin, were a little upset with Lance Stroll in that second lap qualifying, and as he started his lap, they were seeing Williams cars on the track that they had to navigate past. Just into where the other ball, what is that? It's not lane. You need it, actually. Right, just 7 shots. Use there. showing you just, cannot heat you have to dissipate, but you want to get it so that it doesn't affect the under tray, the back of the car, or your over-air wing. It's all quiet for Oscar Piastri, and here's Nico Hulkenberg. The sprint race for me, it was a shame for many drivers. It was a crying shame for this man who has not scored a point since Silverstone when he got his first podium in Formula One after many years of pride. And he absolutely dispersed some points after what was a brilliant qualifying that came to nothing for the sprint race. And come on, Nico, let's do it again today, right? Yeah, it was that's not a power story. It's a really drive it flat out in turn until let's call it apex. There's quite hard to see, but more hard to see. It's having to slow down perhaps a little bit more in the early phases. There were Sunner on board and McLaren, for example, of this section. And if I understand the front side of line 9, and you didn't ever see it was kind of where to turn the wheel. You brake slightly into the hill there. Turn the car. Oh, very thunderous it was. Waiting for the front to went around back corner. How the right has like a thick banana this straight. If you have a little crest and it's super bumpy. And the braking, but you've got to get it slowed down and turn to far left. Or you back down. You've got to sweep across the road. And this is a key area then. Quite technical where it should be. And it's easy to overdrive it. With wide turn in, so you can straighten the car up and use the 1,000 horsepower under your right foot. And when you get 1,500 horsepower, it wouldn't be enough down the back straight. This car hitting the ground, all fresh skid locked on, ready for the race. And I think around in there, it looked shiny, wasn't it? See, they're using all the track through the exit, staying right for the shortest run to the line, and it's a 34.3 is the first of each one. 1.3 seconds slower than the fastest time in on last year's set by Max Verstappen, ahead of his teammate Gabriel Bortoleto by 3/10 of a second. This is that lighting where they widen the wide line to make it easier for the driver. And Carlos Sainz fails out of that lap and has decided that it isn't going to be enough. So to get a bit higher up, and as Bowler coming to the pits. As was Isaac Pajar now watching the monitors after his accident causing that red flag. Ollie Behrman puts his hat in the crater. The two Salvers just a few 100ths of a second off over Nico Hulkenberg. If Max Verstappen can get going now on his first flying lap into this late after the qualifying session for the Grand Prix. Verstappen, the last pole-sitter to finish on the podium for a Grand Prix here in Austin. Back in 2021, where he won, of course, from first sector, 25 watt. They're on board with Nico Hulkenberg. It is about 4/10 per second slower than that through the first sector. As you said, Martin, Nico was at the back off a bit, but you won't see the ripple all over the track now. That's quite wide there at T11 for Max Verstappen, but sometimes you can carry even more speed on that power. Wide there then, but down his strong in lap distance on top of the bend, and he's so on top of this car. He really is confident, but the gain even in turn 12, front of the car, didn't really want to make big bends. They're very good for this car. He said, a little bit suspect. That wasn't a sprint race. Not even jockeying and rebalancing field. Matt Norris, who saw snapped at the pit lane on used tyres, he came in at the end of his outmap, quick tyre change in the pit lane, and he's back down on the track on used tyres. As Max Verstappen ran on the final corner down for the Amsterdam corner goes quickest. I tapped the half from Fernando Alonso, George Russell in third, giving out to Nelly County for the head of Liam Lawson. Franco Colapinto slows to the 10th time for bar. And down in 10th place, Romano's out qualified his teammate Pierre Gasly for the last 3 Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, 9th place, 6 up for the second clear of Max Verstappen. That went on used tyres, mind you. Oh, yes, where you going, global that team, but any either wants it. Must be quite a tailwind in there because everybody hit on board with this sort of. I had to wait to the front to grip up through there. I need a little bit more speed. In what it can do. Down into floor, there's that down in slow. with the understeer then generates the oversteer, you slide wide, pick up the throttle, blessing is the like that the oversteer is generated by the initial oversteer, and then he may start 202 miles an hour for Oscar Piastri with the speed trap, with DRS of course at the end of that straight. So now with his teammates, Lando Norris, George Russell, he brings to the left-hand side, basically breaking third by C4 for that. The guy Lewis now wants our into third place. Piastri crosses the line, 35th fastest, getting 3/10 off the pace. And that is a new set of tyres as well for Piastri. And lots of Bomblius that would have to place straight out of the box. Let's ride on board now with Lando Norris to the by champion. What a ride on board with any of the 20 drivers in this session. Or might think that a hand is out. You can think you need this Sky Sports app, this Sky Sports login, and you can access fully on board, have the team radio, and if you're on Sky Q, Sky Glass, Sky Stream or now, pressure with directed by the remote control. And that's not great first sector. Lando Norris, I mean, when he's already off, and that's lap gone. That's another set of tyres there. Norris under pressure. It was outside track limits there, I believe. And the car was sliding all over the place. First sector wasn't particularly impressive. It was a 25.6. 25.1 is the fastest we've had that first sector. He's then pushing to try and make up for it. He goes off the track, and the consequences there, Martin, a set tire hit. And let's hope he's got a bit of extra fuel in it. He can charge the battery, cool things down a little bit. And yeah, I mean, he had several adventures before he got there. Was one of them. And that's the second one. Then a Smart were on the top there. And he had to steer into the slide, which took him off the track, like the went through the gravel. So let's see if he'll regroup and go again. It needs to, doesn't it? That's the problem, because he never got layered fifth fuel off course, which, to go to that first sector, it looks likely that he might have. Yeah. I need to play it instantly 10th. I think let's see what tire he goes out on. I'd be amazed, although one time he's might think it, but another new set of tyres on Lando's car. But you might have to go with the old set. You hear me think about that. And just to remind you, it's not going again. Or he does have the fuel. But Max did a time for P2, just to remind you, 65,000 seconds off the first last time on the reused tyres. So it's okay. The tyres are going for that. Is this a push lap on the tyres significantly cooler? Anyway, as much cool as he'd like, but it's a push lap. He's got to get a time on the board. And it's a little bit more this time. The previous lap was a little bit wary. And takes next curve in a ultimate tight here in 9. And then another driver that is struggling to get the front round. Thanks to Leclerc and everywhere. And to right on the 12 hard, pulling them twice and early. The heads up down the straight, you can open the DRS, of course, in qualifying in the zones. You won't have to be within a second if somebody else. That's the last thing you need to be doing, really. But they're free in qualifying. So, nice apex at 12, nice-ish. And it is a carry good speed through this technical. After final part of the lap. And this one's coming together somewhat more nicely. But Lando Norris, that wide sweep in. And now you've got the quadruple apex. And he's pinched in there a little bit on his way on the way in. He couldn't take a nice sweeping line in there with the Red Bull in the way. And then it's just arrived and dried into that turn 19. Don't get too greedy. That was Lando's advice to me, wasn't it? On our track guide in the final corner. Goes over the line and so that's a 1:33.8 for Lando Norris. Currently, 1:34.5 gets you through. But they're all cheering up on the sides to come back out and put the pressure on here. Piastri has stayed out to do another full lap before one more push lap, and he's only 6th fastest, the championship leader. And the team McLaren separated by only 3/100ths of a second. Charles Leclerc with fastest time so far at 1:33.5, and the bottom 5 on Badger, and he won't be going out again. Also, Exo Albon, Robert Pinto and Strolling has a 5-place grid penalty wherever he finishes. If it was Q2, you'd say Leclerc would be super nervous, but only 4 didn't drop out now with Badger already out. So it should, in theory, be okay. Happy Evolution will come into play. Track temperature starting to fall just a little bit. We're what, 25 past 4 in the afternoon here. The sun's starting to sink just a little bit here. So all sorts of things to contend with here. And negotiating 20 corners, a nice three newbies for George Russell. So, newbie not this current 8th place. All beams through the exit, being, and it moves to one of them speakers for the 2 poles so far this season. The George Russell restart near 4th in 2022. He goes from around the Simon charts and almost the green stage. Savoda, 134.2 on the board, to do with at least another personal best through this final sector, and to try and put some distance between himself and the bottom 5, if this might be the lap that has to count for Yuki Tsunoda. And he goes like fastest one, 133 right now. It's been right by McLaren, so should be using to those supporting the Papaya. But he's not enough for Yuki Tsunoda. So then he crosses the line, goes second fastest behind his teammate. Now, it might, it'll certainly relax the McLaren pit wall a little bit. It's going to happen to Kimi and Simeone. Yeah, I'm going to oversteer on top of the hill, dropping his way through that nicely cut across 10. It's alright, you see? But it's alright, effective, industrious, shall we say, for Kimi Antonelli. Meanwhile, muscling his way down that back straight, for step 25 more. Oh, the first sector had been worried, but on his previous best time, but doesn't breathe. Through the middle part of the lap, still one number with George Russell here, but they're all thereabouts. We know the pass is pretty good in the final sector and can make up the time now, and there are 3 personal best times being set all the way through the timing screens at the moment. We've got 19 cars on track and everyone going for it as we reach the end of this first part of qualifying. Verstappen rounds the final corner, crosses the line, goes quickest by a 10. George Russell final sector. They absolutely aced it. The Gita Altis on board with Gabriel Portoletto now. First visit at St. Austin first US Grand Prix here. Having 20th and last without setting a time. It's first qualifying. Meanwhile, fellow rookie Ali Behrman goes fastest. Wants to get behind the McLaren, but ahead of Tsunoda. Ultra third, leads up, gets in 5th place. Tsunoda is down in 12th, where there are even more green sectors being set. Below Yuki Tsunoda, Gabriel Portoletto's got a couple of them. Is this going to be good enough to jump the Red Bull, though it's not only 14 for the Sauber driver? Indeed, so with McLaren just stealing triangle, and midstream is on another lap, no, 9th and 10th now. Well, McLaren's, I think they're going to be okay here, aren't they? But it's going to be touch and go, and yes, they could put a better lap in. Liam Lawson's out of qualifying, only 17th for him. Lance Stroll moved up into 11th place, but she's suddenly down in the 13th. I mentioned that John Pinto's out qualified Pierre Gasly. In the last 2 races, he's a couple of tenths down on Gasly on this lap. Carlos Sainz has absolutely aced the first sector, and Wilson slammed into bed fastest. He managed to complete his lap. Apologies for that, Liam Lawson, Brad. And he is cycling through Gasly. What we say, it's 7th, Tsunoda down to 14th. Checker Black is 5 now. And Olivetto get itself out of qualifying. And come on, get himself out of qualifying. Olivetto does, but we learned Tsunoda pushes bottom. That's a house of unqualified. One is down there. And we're not going fast enough, but we can look now in the distance. See Alex Albon down towards turn 12. Now, Alex Albon has not got the off Q1 in Austin since 2022, and he's had a couple of good sectors here, but he tried to make progress here for the first time in quite a while. Yeah, so with the team, McLaren now in the championship battle, they're down in 11th and 12th, and probably safe, but this is looking like a really handy lap for Alex Albon to lift him from McLaren. He asked, but the runners still remaining from the speed, really wide turn into T90. He's looking okay, isn't he? And certainly his last Stroll isn't, so that time deleted. That's why he's 18. But Bob goes 8. Pushes Connor Prince down into the bottom 5. And that lap time deleted by Lance Stroll has saved Yuki Tsunoda in the Red Bull. Albon was uttering some close to 50 minutes in the final turn. Wow, we could probably just cammed his front tire on the line. Yeah, that was a bit sketchy for a few people, wasn't it? For everyone else, Tsunoda was facing a few more elimination. Oh, that Alex Albon done his lap time deleting in that. So, Robin 8, he goes down into the bottom 5. Well, it was turn 15 coming out of the mini stadium section, those slower corners, and Alex Albon is out in the first part of qualifying. Bortoleto, Bucon, Stroll, Albon, and Fajar, who found the wall. It was a great lap, but he didn't keep it between the white lights. So now I just think it's sloppy from Albon. When he's taken the risk of so many of those corners, I get things to crack him in. When we're at mid-feeding and we're quite getting it, so he's running it on the gas, it's straight over the steering wheel, or you can get the throttle down and find some traction. A little bit greedily rather than be force wide by the car that would be in the penultimate corner, for example. That was 30C when you were spinning there, so it's still the turn. I had a little direction for oversteer with and pick up a lap wide shot. And he knows the limits, he just had it back there a bit rid of it. 4 corner. If you shake the black line, red flags are off. He's over there, 19. Yeah, you were right. On the home board, actually, you can see a lot more. It's not just reading as he does find the big snap that we couldn't see from the first shot. This was Lance Stroll down beyond the white line. That was the exit of turn 12. And he is another driver to fall in the first part of qualifying, along with Esteban Ocon. His teammate Oliver Behrman made it through. But Alex Albon, given the pace of the Williams, he did lap the third in the sprint race. It is an unfortunate result. The lead is out in Q1, the third consecutive year. The circuit of the Americas will not be a happy London Grand Prix. Yeah, he will be a frustrated boy because I didn't see the opportunity. It shows the way that the sprint format now, and you can change your car after the rules are lifted. In the past, you'd be locked in from Friday all the way through to the end of Sunday with your setup. Now you could change things as of last year already. And you have a team that was flying yesterday, both cars in the top 10. Albon finished 6th, Sainz was 3rd earlier on, looking hunky-dory. And now he's out. Okay, the time was good enough if he had made it through, but he knows that he needs to be maximizing all of those exits just to get through. And then you've had a little oversteer through the apex, and there was flight that moved him out, but on the limit, a little bit of understeer of oversteer, and you didn't go over the track limits. Heading out in the first part of qualifying, Bortoleto, Ocon, Stroll, Alex Albon with his times elated, and Isaac Hadjar, who found the barriers. Let's check in for some analysis now with Ruth and Jex. High-tweeted session, we even said it at the top of the show that success in sprint qualifying guarantees nothing in Grand Prix qualifying, and so far it's already been a bit mixed up. And Ruth, we talked a lot about track evolution yesterday. Normally as a weekend progresses, more rubber goes down, that rate of evolution sort of shrinks. That does not seem to be the case today, and a lot of teams took slightly different strategies in that session, didn't they? Yeah, exactly. So when the red flags halted the session, we had 14 minutes, 50 seconds on the clock, enough for 2 runs. Super interesting how McLaren took a completely different approach to every other team. Now, the tire is best for 1 lap, but with that track evo, with a double cool to burn soil for 2 laps, you can go again. They actually filled for 5 or 6 even time lapse on that car, which is taking around 3/10 extra of fuel. Very, very conservative, like we've seen from McLaren before. Red Bull, completely opposite strategy. Max went out on a used stock, like the stock that they used in SQ3 yesterday. 1 time lap, and then out again 1 time lap on a new tire at the end of the session. Absolute massive aggression, completely different strategy. Decent amount of repair work had to be done in both those McLaren. I wonder if that contributed to them carrying more fuel and wanting to do those more laps. And in those early laps, Lando Norris really struggling over the bumps that are part of the characteristic of the track here at COTA. And this is what happened on that first flyer, where he put himself in a tough spot. And Ruth having that first lap really not count and having to then make a pivot save on that, make 1 run at it in the second part of the session. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think McLaren put those extra laps of fuel in to get that reference, but it did actually put him out of phase, aka he is doing a soy lap when everyone is going fast. And which is, she said, Duff put you on the back foot. And if that McLaren wasn't going fast enough, it could have been, in a different car with a different driver. That could have been the difference being through or not. And just real quick, the words we all hate to hear, hate to say, track limits once again playing a part. Alex Albon a little bit wide in turn 15, maybe a lot wide. I think turn 19 may have been an issue as well, but that team, again, like Sauber, performing once again, like you just see right there, sorry, this is out of 12. Into 13 is going to come up to the infraction here coming out of 15, just trying to get everything out of it. But that was a top 10 timer. They didn't need to be pushing the light that hard, did he? But it's so hard from behind the wheel to hold back. So what? It does look tricky conditions out there, very dusty, potentially a snap. I think we might see more of it as we go through the sessions. Very tricky conditions. Track limit's always an issue. We're going to head back up to the booth as the green light's coming on soon. Yep, I don't hate where he is steering wheel swap with a picture at the whole length grips come up. Then we'll slow there. Green light at the end of the pit lane for Q2. Lando Norris needs a steering wheel change. That's an unusual one. Yeah, only if the won't grip with them all, they actually could take down a steering wheel and change it there. Yeah, they need to push him ahead of the fast lane, wouldn't they, to then work on the car again. He's gone out onto the track. He's in a queue to head out onto the track. We wanted to turn that camera around to see what he's talking about exactly. And you feel with the been whips literally nothing on. The rubber on the outside bar that the palm of your hand is banging to. That's starting to go then. But inner out of the wing, yeah, it sits like a latex rubber one. It's upward onto the carbon fiber. But the steering wheel, the fiber, some of them more have it molded to the active shape of the hands. Others will be just more generic shape across the drivers. It put me off, I think. Sorry, that was Lando. But to the end of which, pretty chilled on the radio. Whether there's a Grand Prix or whether it's sitting in the pit lane ahead of quality, he's got any match of refracts about everything. So to happy a place, overall case-wise, since the summer break. Other results haven't always gone out, but he does seem in a very relaxed frame of mind. And he wouldn't have felt. Seemed to shrug it off nicely. Interesting to see whether he comes back into the pit lane after the one lap. Using the steering wheel that is not quite seemingly lighting. Good to have a look, wouldn't it? Like picture what he's doing with the moment. And also in my years of watching, I've had to go some of this before. Now, if there's just a little part of it squaring away, or if that whole part of it, if the whole element of it is starting to come loose in his mouth or fall up into his lap or something. The answer is attacking the racetrack driver who missed out on the third part of qualifying yesterday. It's fine margins, but he was in 11th. Lewis Hamilton demoted him at the very end. In a good pace in the first part. The realistic picture as we progress through. And what a corner followed by another great one. What a sequence we have in this opening sector. Then you're dropping off more speed, climbing the hill. A moment. It's nice and far for the Mercedes. Timmy Azzelli with a sprint pole earlier in the season, looking to make amends for yesterday and fight his way into the top 10 sheet. But here's a man with likes and apex. Absolutely sort of textbook through the hairpin at Channel 11, which is an contrast to what we saw with Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, a little bit shorter as well. And by way of reference, his teammate George Russell will then move way through turn 11. Nicely measured for Antonelli. It places the chain of confidence that he had about the didn't he really had 3 points in a European related for season after that fantastic 30 performance in Montreal. Budapest race, it didn't yield any point, but the confidence back behind the wheel. Grand Prix qualifying 2, experiencing a Dom said he was very much a lyric overall pace on the car. I think what he said there was a front row chance and he went beyond track limits. Talking of track limits is the fastest time for Kimi Antonelli. But alongside, they tried in a table trying to work out when we kept it on the road. Well, I would have deferred to my younger colleague on the other ice speed, but that worked well enough. Yeah, I think that's the test passing here as well because it's every corner there. Laying onto the track, Russell Savory's on a used tyre there that made it grass and it looked like he was fighting in the rear, going up with the back. It's every corner, isn't it, here? And I think after yesterday, they're realizing the drivers obviously side pilots a little bit, but they did that, and then maybe I'm not going to notice they're understeer in the big corner headset. It's so difficult with there's so many corners you can just run over. As continuing on through the corner of his teammates, so he extends his advantage in the head-to-head battle. then 8 off, broken with it disqualified last week, so no head-to-head winner. Singapore Grand Prix. The lost them, and it's Granville side, very Wilson, Van Russell, by himself. In the top line, let's go on board. We got our second in the point at Axel Bowling, so Axel at the moment 22 points away from Boston Piastri. He will carry the Northries like in the second line, straight back into the new tyre, and on the steering wheel as well. But at the far little, we had that. The arm of his back, so we are bringing him up the further people. And it's not throwing him down in the middle sector. Fastest of anyone understand, but now they're also did as well. They're very completed at first, and they're also on new tyres. That's actually trying to lead it. Sorry, yes, sorry for that. Just to see Verstappen as my battle in that middle sector pretty much. So we know how quick Verstappen was in the final sector on the previous run. He goes to assists. And Verstappen 132.701. Norris quite the dead to the second back. Let's see what Oscar Piastri can do. Put it back to the first. I'm going to say the speed lane already in but it in government and it was that so he really did confidence again, I think, today. He's in the break of the time thing. Only into that by getting it nicely through the engine as well without big slides or that getting well gets himself up to fifth position, but behind the Williams of Carlos Sainz and the Mercedes of Kimi Antonelli. Ferrari still to set a time. Charles Leclerc in the Scarlet now. The 20th corner of this 3.4 mile circuit. The Monegasque driver over the line, and he goes ahead of the McLaren of Lando Norris. Goes in into second position. That's just doesn't let it right now. There was a great gap between him and Verstappen yesterday. I mean, there's spots of the bend in that trend, which set a few ups and Hamilton jumps up ahead of a big dead now. It's shuffled out to 7th. Same sort of pace as Alonso. Alonso was on the spot tyre there. So it's looking vulnerable to the midfielders right now, perhaps with that 3-10 gap to Norris. Yeah, Matt over here, in the middle of that first sector. We join the onboard. That's the same bump as Agile bound in turn 6 with one of Pinto. That's an attractive movement of the man, and it's just slow and in the final corner. I think Gasly would have been past the classified runners even if that lap had counted, so he has to go again. Right to the end, back made by Bernardor. I thought this would be my first like slow down like very good. This sort of answer remember. Nothing like that, all the old friends. Some, I think, G Praxis students for Frank Alpine, sorry, I think get Max a lot of room as well. So, understandably, there's his own performance, his own future. They almost touched, didn't they, UP and in the dash to get a final lap in SQ1 yesterday. But I wasn't very aware that it's him and Wilson fighting for their future, and they have this little bit of beat now that's growing. Probably Wilson's trying to use the Nodo or trying to do anything super clever there. You know, he's only going to hurt his own chances more by picking up a penalty if it's severe at all. I think there's but there really wasn't at turn 11. No issue at the moment. Majority of cars in the pits. Lawson in the drop zone. Sonoda in the drop zone. George Russell as well went out there on the used tyres. He's down in 12th position. And then the two Alpines couldn't find 3 laps between the pair of them and keep it within the white lines on run number 10. So Piastri's definitely got to find some performance. He's 110 inside the drop zone. But Russell, as you say, hasn't run new tyres. Hulkenberg hasn't run new tyres. Alonso hasn't run new tyres. He has 3 cats. So he is a driver that builds up very nicely through a qualifying hour, but starting from a pretty low baseline here. There's a lot of meaty corners. If you're lacking a little bit of balance or lacking a bit of confidence, they're compounded way around the lap. But he'll be counting at the very least to be right there with Norris. That's really needs to man mark. Verstappen's just getting adherence to ever, isn't he? Every lap. Whether it caused a little bit of a hamper or not, he's finding the time in it. But it's on Ferrari with them, I think, in Venice. They carried on their Q1 form. 2nd and 4th, they found a little bit of what they were missing. Yeah, but Hamilton again, right there with Leclerc, really. And but Well, the Hamilton brand's definitely happening. He's, despite the difficulties, he's getting to grip with that car relative to Charles, who I could still consider one of the fastest single-man drivers out there. Yeah, top 10 between them is very, very even. He's been quietly getting closer anyway through the year. The Ferrari cars have been getting, yes, competitive, which doesn't help Lewis's cause. It's like they're on a better chance here, especially with Piastri struggling. Norris, the finest quickly has been thinking McLaren will find a bit more form, able to find through the car, having missed out on the sprint earlier on and had to prepare it. Like gassing looking for legal time, the same applies to Franco Colapinto, had a big moment of turn 6, but George Russell going out nice and early. He's got a new set of Pirelli soft tyres on the car, and he needs a clean lap to progress into the top 10 shootout, something that he's done at all the Grand Prix, apart from Monaco this year. Let's watch the effects nicely of the turn 1, and then roar up there, and there's a wonderful sort of lunge into a fantastic sequence of high-speed corners. Just enjoy the ride, everybody. Far so good, but it's working. It's majestic through those fast corners. Load it up, so slower than 110 off ground with a whole lot of it. And he clappers over those turns at 8 and 9 and gets through there, DP as well. Scrappy final chicane there, bumping out over the top, especially with the tailwind today. The Russell on the new tyres is finding a little bit of time. Yeah, looked really good. We're half a tenth away from the fastest Darcy so far, which is Max Verstappen, so very much in the hunt. Of turn 12, worrying at that latest the lunges up against Max Verstappen earlier on. It's time being compared to Hulkenberg in 10th position. He's gonna hope that those tyres have stayed in for the final sector. Well, he's not hugely clear. For a time set a while ago now. Compared to Hulkenberg's new tyre time, the new tyres will give you a little bit more as we get to the end of the lap. Out of 15, having a little bit more of a plant of exit out of the final turn as well. But this needs to be a big final sector for George Russell. He moves up to 6th position, just behind his teammate. It was way more of a step forward in the final third of the lap. It needed to be. Hulkenberg is now down into the drop zone, along with Lawson, Tsunoda, and the 2 Alpines currently Colapinto ahead of Gasly. Brilliant for Russell though. Second run at it. But the used tyre, the bending new, Antonelli on his first is still quicker and goes out again on a new tyre. Stick to place, it'd be okay, because all of the drivers behind the B ones they get expect to be scrapping to make it through. Not many big shots other than Piastri to find a load of time. Alonso's the new play. Hulkenberg actually might call, maybe he's a big shot. Yuki Tsunoda marginally up on the time he is trying to beat, which currently belongs to Oliver Behrman in 10th position. The 50 back Q3 clearances, that is not the Route 3 turn 11. Tsunoda was looking for only 5 margins to make it through here. Every corner needs to be perfect. He's chasing it once again. And down in that first sector relative to his teammate. Just not really out running with the car. When you find yourself or went for performance and you look at Charles and say, well, I'm limited to this lap time, and the same car is capable in different hands of doing that lap time. Therefore, you've got to look in the mirror and what am I not doing that Max is able to do? Sometimes it's easy to drive in that scenario as well, and you would think that's earlier on in the lap, still within touching distance. He's only 100 up of Behrman, by the way, on the times. 9,000 up on Alonso's run, and close there. So it doesn't trouble them. So they're not going through. He was chasing that lap all the way round, and he can't find the pace. He was looking for his ninth progression into Q3. He couldn't find it. Neither could Hulkenberg. Track falling away slightly. We're not seeing improvements here. Oh, well drift. But Kimi Antonelli looked great. Wasn't particularly quick. He remains in fifth. It is like the track just run away. Russell's time was a bit underwhelmed with it. I said, but no one else had been good. Hulkenberg slow on a new tyre than he was on the used. We've got the Alpines out there trying to find time. We've got Lawson out there trying to find time. No, continually rapid coming in. Hulkenberg in 11th, Lawson in 12th, Tsunoda 13th, with fine an improvement. Alpines do not grab a clean lap, but don't grab a representative time to compare to. We're into the dying seconds of Q2. So you'll see the Aston Martin Alman, that's on the new tyre. He's had to go on a starting new tyre, which is compromising for the Q3. He's probably going to be able to back out of it because no one's going to be able to struggle him this far out of Q3. But that's the jeopardy that he put himself in with that first lap. Yeah, makes us be an error to then. Behrman's gone over the line and he's half a second back to the benchmark of Max Verstappen. Bolloped inside, getting a clean lap in when it counts. Gasly is not too far away. Gasly is still in the battle to make the top 10 shootout. His teammate falling away. Gasly got it in the top 10 here for the Grand Prix last year. As he bet the tyres in, been ironic he's been into Q3 for the 8th time this year. But in the end, it fell away dramatically. And that final third of the lap is in 40th position. Lewis Hamilton then finding himself comfortably through 2/10 of a second away from Verstappen, putting a lot happier. Well, most of the session you've been behind a bit. Well, Apex, but not mountain driver going on now at the end of Q2 compared to what we're used to. Guys, I guess it's just really a little exploratory lap. He was marginally quicker in that first sector, which is a meaty section, so that would be a good indication. Yeah, promising there, but no one's finding pace at this final lap. It's sitting in the commentary box. He's looking at a straight sun has been out there the whole time. Only imagine that the temperature's constant. Imagine the wind has just picked up and it started dusting around in the last couple of minutes because no one found anything, but those that went from the new side to the new tide have been find pace. And then it's through to the top 10. Will do so in consecutive races for the first time in his Formula One career. Made it in Singapore, he's made it in Austin, and crucially, he's made it back to the pits because that was a big moment where you are fully committed in the car. Wasn't the only one that's on board with Valkenberg, who will not make the top 10 shootout like he did yesterday. At their stairs, running out of tyres towards the end of the lap there. Oh, that could be across the side of the car. Oh, they got that short come off final corner, the flag of the turn one. Max Verstappen dropped the session, then it was Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Kvyat ahead of George Russell. It was in the drop zone but found a comfortable lap by going out early for his final run. Signs of the quick, notable victory this weekend so far. The last three still slightly on the back foot, it appears, but he always dials it up. The Q3, Alonso and Behrman will take part. The 5 to 4, Valkenberg, Lewis and Tsunoda, Gasly, and Bonnet. Just me, this is good to me for McLaren. Verstappen sits in furious all the time. He's at the top. The Barons seem to have lost form from when they were yesterday, where they were out close with Norris. Verstappen's pace. Still Q3 to come, some final tweaks that they can make, and you look at the data as well. But Ferrari are also up there. So if there's a 2-10 gap between Verstappen and the McLarens, there's a chance that the Ferrari's been jumping ahead of them today. Yeah, it could well be though, of course, that this is the compromise they needed to land with to get the car performance in the race. We know the track is bumpy. We know they'll have 100 kilos to fill on board tomorrow. And maybe the driver, this is a compromise for quality. But they don't know because they didn't do the race earlier on. So they've got no more data than they had really yesterday. Unless they're going purely off sprint quality and going off that feedback. They haven't done the race run to think how we're going to set it up differently than they thought after practice. First instance of the qualifying hour was Isaac Padjar finding the barrier. He talked to us in the media pen afterwards. I refer to the cage, that was obviously a big hit. Just run me through that moment when you got it off the car, you got it going, what happened? Then the pretty surprising flat with him. And I think I could have done to catch the car differently. But if it is something I could have done before the corner, just misjudge it, and honestly I'd be speed, it's unforgivable. If they have frustrated you, I can feel more just not in it, explaining the car is faster outdoors, isn't it? Yeah, the guy's fast, that's why I'm really, it's hard to be on the bench while others are driving. I really want to be out there, but very frustrating. Perfect. Hearing for Isaac Padjar there, who we expect to be promoted to the Red Bull senior team. All the while on the left-hand side of your picture, Yuki Tsunoda, not happy with what he was receiving on track. And, stress message back to the pit lane, not happen with the car placement in front. It was an Alpine, wasn't it? I don't know if it was Gasly or Bonapinto. They ended up 14 to 15 behind Tsunoda. It's a little bit close for Yuki coming through there, but still we see it up in 10th, but yeah, it must have happened. Lando Norris finds himself at the third fastest time going into his final part of qualifying. And then on side to the outspeed signed Russell, Antonelli, Hamilton, Norris, Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen will reset the times to have a top 10 shootout. After he's looking for his best lap for a while here, trying to arrest the slide in the championship. With the result that we had earlier in the last 4 rounds, obviously the Grand Prix to run, 49 points. Max Verstappen has taken out Oscar Piastri. Interesting, actually, and slightly surprising, was when we just had an image there of and I think it was Lando's t-shirt jumping up and down. But I read the fan zone, and there was a question thrown out to the crowd, and a sizable crowd, Oscar and Lando. There was a big cheer for Oscar, which I was a little bit surprised by that, given that, well, I think Lando's a very popular driver, he's been in Formula 1 a bit longer. But Cowling, actually, Lando did pull up that rail football and a promotional event down in the long guy. He's not the crowds, I'd say, but I'd say to them when Andy Murray was asked to bird, he's playing a football, he's in anyone but England, and he talked a bit of British support at that point. Yeah, it took about 6 years to regain the trust of the British public. One throwaway comment and people don't let you forget. Both McLaren drivers very, very popular. There's that when you've got the top 2 positions in the World Championship with 6 Grand Prix to go, and we're setting the grid at the sharp end for it. Carl's healing into the pit lane, we're down to 10, so finding your own part of the circuit gets a lot easier. This is once again completely unknown. Ferrari look a lot better than we've seen in recent qualifying performances. You'd expect McLaren to be in the mix as well. Mercedes, not with the alternate pace, but definitely capable of the second row of the grid. Certainly, we find ourselves with a wide open session again, beginning in a minute's time. So look at Russell's tyres and look at Piastri's. Arsenal's on a brand new set of soft. Piastri's having to run a scrub set. Now that says his NPC has only done an outline in it because he didn't have to push on it at the end of Q2, but he's still got to use it, but it needs cycle on. So it's never optimal to do that. It'll still be a good tyre. It's not like you've hurtled around and slid in and taken rubber off it. But the heat cycle, getting it back into the right window, the right pressure, is not ideal. That because he did do a good enough first lap of Q2 to be safely through. He had to be out of 780 in case he needed to improve. Yeah, horses, sort of final moments of thought and preparation, getting into the business end of qualifying. Next, just waiting everybody to stay in the garage for now. I've been last, don't they? Ambitious with the run plan. Let everyone else go out there with the last over the line, take the most of the track evolution and hope that no one beats it to stop getting a lap in. In Baku, we were for the pole position from Max Verstappen. In Singapore, it was a McLaren 6 seconds up the road. Causing a little bit of dirty air that was noted by the reigning world champion. It looked like he was going to be relinquishing his titles when we left the Hungarian Grand Prix. Since then, has been sensational, always in the top 2 or higher. Their pole position there, it will be more pressure on the McLarens when the McLarens respond. The team trying to get back to the ball that we've become so accustomed to find their way on to the top step. It's 3 Grand Prix since McLaren has won the race. This is a really big Q3 now, especially after what happened earlier on and the points just being eroded by Verstappen. Piastri, if he's not having a good day, he's going to get back to the front 2 rows. No doubt about it. He can't open himself up to be further down in 5th and 6th and get another chance to be sandwiched at the first corner, although we very much know it didn't happen to anyone at the front of the grid or further back. Norris really needs to be able to fight with Max as well and get past Verstappen. Down at banging in the pole positions and upping the pressure. All the while, Ferrari the Blake in mid-plane here on a brand spanking new set is going to be thinking this is a chance for him once again. So a couple of runs expected in this final part of qualifying. Between these pole position picture tells you all you need to know about this racetrack. It can change year on year dramatically. Valtteri Bottas a year off with the pandemic, then Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, and last year, Lando Norris, G'd up by his engineer on the radio, encouraged that he had the performance, found it, started at the front. He did not convert that one into Grand Prix victory. That went away. The man trying the switchback move at turn 1, the much debated switchback move at turn 1. Charles Leclerc that day, it did not work out for Oscar Piastri. It was P3 on the road, and that went early in the sprint. Here he is, the championship leader, the Australian driver, looking for his best lap of the weekend as he attacked. Yeah, the first of the main runners to get a time on the board this time, Piastri. Went into the Norris yesterday, but on a scrub set, so it should be absolutely optimal this first run for Oscar. But we're going to fly past Max Verstappen at some point on his lap as well, because Max has done out so late compared to everyone else. Let's see, Piastri then through the high speed, darting to the right, and then making it over the bumps and the brows of those quick corner. 45 per hour sneaking into turn 8. Body language of the car looks on edge, doesn't it? It just looks like at any moment they can step out. George Russell has done the fastest third sector. Oliver Behrman not too far behind until Piastri on the scrub set. Just getting his references in for an all-or-nothing final run now. Not an ideal position to be in. It's not looking good. He's 3 tenths down on Russell in the third sector. It still looks like he's struggling to find form and confidence. If you say the car looks lively, he looks darting and it's definitely not pleasant to drive, which is something we don't often say about this year's McLaren. Australian driver has never started in the top 4 around here. 5th place, the best he's managed. These 2 appearances at this slower than Behrman. It's comparable with Behrman, really 2 sectors. Well, trying to thank the knowledge of us for coming for you drivers, but just not good for the confidence. You want to build it all the way through. So I start applying that now. The stuff in his dicks for me did see him get overtaken, and this back will be the last of the line again. So Russell's going to put a time on the board. The 1:32.959. It's Russell ahead of Behrman. The new set for Piastri, no way comparable. Lando Norris, as you would expect on championship form so far, he's fastest ahead of the Mercedes in the first sector. Carlos Sainz having made the top 10 shootout. We lead Williams on the grid. Both Ferraris not going up at this point either. Hamilton's made a mistake in the first sector. Leclerc not unbelievably either, so is Norris. And Verstappen now even quicker than Norris in the first sector, gunning for that top spot. Really, really tight margins. Remember, Norris and Verstappen's time is being compared to George Russell, our most recent pole sitter from the Singapore Grand Prix, with an amazing step forward in Q3 there. Norris would try to find a reminder point. Verstappen is on electric in the final segment. There's only 1,000 between the two of them in the first part of the lap. Norris's middle part is solid but not spectacular. It becomes 2 corners to go. Leaning on it, but needing a bit of margin at 19. This is it for Lando Norris. Every moment of oversteer is time falling away, but it's enough to get ahead of George Russell and take provisional pole on the first run. But fastest in sector 1, fastest in sector 2. It's looking good, but Max Verstappen at Mason Tady at the end of the back straight there as well. We saw Norris at everything of the tyres coming off the final corner. And as you highlighted, this group Verstappen had been consistently strong. 1 corner of the 20 remains, where edges Verstappen's first effort put him as he comes across the line, and he's nearly 4 tenths of a second ahead of his rival for the title. The Aston will start his second run from 7th on the grid, and that is an enormous margin by the standards of Formula 1 in 2025. The expected between Piastri and Verstappen. Now it was a 1-lap spot time with Piastri. That was the punishment for his fairly ordinary first run in Q2. But he put in the fairly ordinary first one in Q2. He's not looking like he's very moved up the championship leader. On the other side, Max Verstappen did do no wrong at the moment, and that is a goal. But Norris is going to try and find to close it down. It looks like it's Verstappen be the rest at the moment. You have that is a very healthy gap for Verstappen to carry into his final one. We see the Hamilton at the issue of that opening sector. Yeah, under braking, under rotation, and a mile wide up the apex. There's also been an error somewhere in the lap, so both Ferraris had a near-cut. They were on much more encouraging form. Dropped it on the first run. Hamilton, like braking in a front run. I've seen it clearly got to the final corner, so one of the first, one of the last. But but really goodness. The complete 360 for Charles Leclerc. They'll get another go, but it fell apart at the end for the man who won the race here a year ago. The wheel so early on the acceleration, there was no obvious sign of oversteer through the event. That's just your driver in front of the throttle, but could have been an issue in the deployment. Verstappen said the track is a bit more difficult. Seems like it is for everyone else, but not Max right now. Wait, he thinks that. Imagine how everyone else thinks around the 20 cents of a second of the Americans. But we saw it at the end of Q2. No one really found big improvements. And at start of Q3, there is a big spread in the field. A lot of errors coming in. Aubrey from PS3, problems with both Ferrari drivers, and different problems for Butler, and just an absolute lack of brake grip for Leclerc. Final sector of the racetrack. George Russell, 30.5. Lando Norris, 30.4. Max Verstappen, 30.1. He is dynamite through the final part of the racetrack. And he's pretty handy in the rough starters relatively. The middle doesn't enter early, correctly since it is the fastest driver in that sector. We're talking tiny margin. Yesterday, there was a lot of gain that Max is having in the last two corners. But we saw Leclerc have his spin, and Max takes a bit of chance with the track image there. Both Lando was a little bit cautious through the penultimate corner, where it's so easy to go over the limit. But there's not 2 tenths there. It might be a half a toe. Look what it was yesterday. If you consider how close the pole margins have been across this entire season, sprint pole yesterday separated by 7 hundredths, to see that sort of gap in one section of the racetrack is remarkable. It was to happen at Norris, Russell, Antonelli, all of the airmen in T5. He's made back-to-back Q3s for the first time in his Formula 1 career, riding on confidence. So, as Sainz, and then you have to feel, in the context of the championship, in the context of what happened earlier, this is a crucial lap for Oscar Piastri. He's the man under the biggest pressure here. Verstappen may well have already sealed pole for his lap. He won't take any chances. He'll be looking and studying how he can improve, and hoping he can find another test in there. I think Norris will be happy with second place right now. The gap that he's got in big to Verstappen is small to Russell, and there's every chance that George can find a little bit more as well. But right, I said he actually thought he was going to beat Bennett, but by word, Bennett done some stonking lap to get up in the top 5, when others have fallen by the wayside on that first run. That is so important now for Oscar to dial in brand new set of soft tyres. He's back behind Lando in the order, so it's going to be Lando first, then Oscar, then Max at the championship victory. He has defined a lap that it is his most pressure qualifying lap of the season. Oscar Piastri at last here in qualifying, 20-4 down, and against his team. Just in a different story entirely this year. 10-8 up. He has been the championship leader since April when he won Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. He is nothing for a lap to arrest the developing narrative. It's averaging points, 49 lost in the last 4 races to Max Verstappen. The Ferraris will be a threat as well, but the improvements. This is really vital for the World Championship. Final 90 seconds of qualifying. Charles Leclerc looking for a clean lap, having spun on run 1. Norris will have to find something as well if the Ferraris can hook up a lap here. Verstappen has left the pit so late, there is only going to be seconds to go before the end of this session. I'd have thought by the time he starts his flying lap, that's how far Red Bull are pushing the envelope here to get the best of the track. As Leclerc dances the Ferrari through the first sector, through those 5-speed turns and left planted is much better for Charles Leclerc this time through that part. Great for a sector for Charles Leclerc, and he continued the momentum, and we're going to believe that superlative through the final sector. They well have taken positive out of anyone's reach for the Ferrari. That's had fractions, haven't it? It's had moments all across the weekend. They have been 20 all together now, around the 20 turns, but don't, maybe it's happened to not this one too fine, or GP and the Red Bull crew have got hurry up now on his outlap to actually get the final lap in. Hamilton really quick through the first part of the lap as well. He did half a tenth of Verstappen's best. As we know though, the final sector is where he's been so mighty in that first lap. For the moment, Charles Leclerc is on course to find himself challenging for the front row of the grid, and he maintained that speed around these thrilling, sweeping corners. 116 miles per hour, and now into my left, 119. It's a decent middle part, and the has a one corner to go. Wasn't got a bit of time there. See where it stacks up. And the Ferraris improve and go. And yes, second position for Charles Leclerc. Norris's first sector is really ordinary. He's on that final flyer right now. He's not made a improvement. The S3 also launched into a lap. The Ferrari's getting himself in the mix. Lewis Hamilton looking for a top 3 star with Ferrari for the first time, and it's 4th position for him. A strong lap. He's thought to enter a second away from Verstappen. Verstappen will not get a second run. But what a foul between the McLarens then. Lando Norris halfway around the lap and struggling to find any sort of pace. The Aston through the first sector is not great either. He knows an improvement. It's not an improvement by nearly enough. There's a defining sector coming your way in a few moments with Oscar Piastri, the driver, on the left-hand side. He needs this to be a step forward, or he could be miles in the middle of the pack. Russell's up ahead of Norris. Norris is still struggling to find time. I don't think he's going to improve at all. Here we go with Carlos Sainz, the Williams driver. Improve at that time, but not a position. Oscar Piastri was working the wheel there, not with perfect grip. Through the mechanical corners that he needed it, and now it's the fast stop. And inside hard work to the McLaren's. Norris responds 6 seconds ahead of Leclerc. What about Piastri? To the front, really far. Norris to take it back. On run show. Oscar Piastri just rugby to be launched to his teammate. There's a pass of final sector of anyone so far. But no, it's been entirely the Civics for Oscar Piastri when Antonelli's still running. Antonelli's still with an opportunity to demand the championship lead up further. David Antonelli currently in P7. Is there ever give us our answer? Can he make it even worse with Piastri? No, he remains in 7th position. But it's Max Verstappen who did the job on round number 1. Max Verstappen takes pole for the US Grand Prix. He's in first, Norris in second, and the championship leader, Oscar Piastri, is in 6th position. The title is wide open. Pressure, building on the McLarens. 3/10 once again between Piastri and Norris, but this time Norris is adrift of Verstappen. And that 3/10 has Piastri on the second part of row 3. 6th position, the Ferraris have turned up. Norris did an outstanding final sector. The best of the session, he got a hit of Verstappen's waiting one. Okay, that's public. Wait for us to hit that. Well, simply not big. Really, learned about that. Well, I think, nice and calm because he's just had a cruisy in-lap. Set in hand because Max didn't do a final lap, of course. So it's a certain times that he's used, but he hasn't lent on those at all. He by some margin. Yeah, Norris's final sector has just saved his bacon there. 6 thousandths ahead of Leclerc. 2 seconds ahead of Russell. And that wasn't the fastest final sector of the session. So he's managed to find it when it counts to get on the front row, but here, back to Verstappen. We have a championship battle on our hands. Max Verstappen's 47th career pole position on a day where he gets a pole already. Taken out 8 points from the McLaren pair. And celebrate that one. And no, there's a big opportunity. Max Verstappen has won 35 of his previous 46 starts from pole. And for that, sights all on the track. Noticed yesterday in their sprint qualifying that the Team Williams drivers, Albon and Sainz, came out of the pits and didn't get a chance to get round to the line to start their lap. And we did wonder what on earth they were doing going out, but it was quite clear they wouldn't get a lap in. But they're on the track, shall we say, when others were trying to set their lap time. They're not officially leading, but, it was just there to make it a little trickier, and he was upset about that. I think maybe their nearest rivals in the championship, Aston Martin, were a little upset. It was a lot Stroll except in that second part of qualifying, and as he started his lap, they were seeing Williams cars on the track, and the Amsterdam again passed. Just into where it won the ball, what is that regret? You need it, right? 7 shots. Is there, showing you just, how much heat you have to dissipate, but you want to get it so it doesn't affect the under tray, the back of the car, or your over rear wing. full quiet for Oscar Piastri. And here's Nico Hulkenberg. The sprint race for me, it was a shame for many drivers. It was a crying shame for this man who has not scored a point since Silverstone when he got his first podium in Formula One after many years of pride. And he absolutely dispersed some points after what was a brilliant qualifying that came to nothing for the sprint race at Quantic. Now let's do it again today, right? Yeah, it was that's not a Irish story, isn't it? Well, really driving it flat out in turn to let's call it apex. There's quite hard to back more hard to see. It's having to slow down perhaps a little bit more in the early phases. There were similar on more than McLaren, for example, on this section. And if I understand the front sliding line 9, and you don't really ever see, of course, when you know where to turn the wheel, you brake slightly into the hill there, turn the car, very ponderous it was, waiting for the front to went around back corner. How the right has like a thick banana this straight. If you have a little crest, then it's super bumpy. And the braking, but you don't get it slow down and turn to far left, or you back down. You've got to sweep across the road. And this is a key area then. Quite technical, very tricky, and it's easy to overdrive it. With wide turn in, so you can straighten the car up and use the 1,000 horsepower under your right foot. And when you get 1,500 horsepower, they wouldn't hit enough down the back straight. This car hitting the ground, all fresh skid blocked on, ready for the race. And I think I'm feeling around in there, but shiny, wasn't it? See, they're using all the track through the exit, stay right for the shortest run to the line, and it's a 34.3 is the first inch. 1.3 seconds slower than the fastest time in on last year's set by Max Verstappen, ahead of his teammate Gabriel Bortoleto by 3/10 of a second. This is that inviting when they widen the white line to make it easier for the driver. If Carlos Sainz fails out of that lap, has decided that it isn't going to be enough. So to get a bit higher up, and as Bernat coming to the pits, as was Isaac Pajar now watching the monitors after his accident causing that red flag. Ollie Behrman puts his hat in the crater. The two Salvers just a few 900ths of a second off over Nico Hulkenberg. If Max Verstappen can get going now on his first flying lap into this late after the qualifying session for the Grand Prix. Verstappen, the last Monster to finish on the podium for a Grand Prix here in Austin back in 2021, where he won, of course, from first sector, 25-1. They're on board with Nico Hulkenberg. It is about 4/10 per second slower than that through the first section. As you said, Martin, Nico was having to back off a bit, but you won't see the ripple all over the track now. That's quite wide there at T11 for Max Verstappen, but sometimes you can carry even more speed on that power. Wide there then, but down into Grom, Max on top of the bend, and he's so on top of this car. He really is confident, but the gain, even in turn 12, front of the car, didn't really want to make big bends. You know, they're very good for this car. So if you're a little bit suspect, that one just put race, not even jockeying and rebalancing field. But Lando Norris, who saw snapped at the pit lane on used tyres, he came in at the end of his outbound, quick tyre change in the pit lane, and he's back down on the track on used tyres. As Max Verstappen runs the final corner now for the Anthony corner goes quickest. I tend to half from Fernando Alonso, George Russell in third, giving out to Nelly County for the head of Liam Lawson. Franco Colapinto slows to the 10th time for bar, and down in 10th place, Romano's out qualified his teammate Pierre Gasly for the last 3 Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc 9th place, 6.9 up to the second clear of Max Verstappen. That went on used tyres, mind you. All the asking where you going global that team, but any rival wants it. Must be quite a tailwind in there because everybody hit on more with this sort of. I had to wait to the front to grip up through there. Now a little bit more speed. I mean, what it can do. Down into flow, there's that down slow. With the other steer then generates the oversteer. You slide wide, pick up the throttle, flexing is the quite often overseas generated by the initial oversteer and any mistake. 202 miles an hour for Oscar Piastri with the speed trap, with DRS of course at the end of that back straight. So now with his teammates, Lando Norris, George Russell keeping to the left-hand side, basically waiting third by C4 that the gun. Lewis Hamilton alongside into place. Piastri crosses the line, 35th fastest, getting 3/10 off the pace, and that is a new set of tyres as well for Piastri. And lots of followers that would have to place straight out of the box. They're trying on board now with Lando Norris to invite champion. What a ride on board with any of the 20 drivers in this session, or might think that it had your result. You can think you need this Sky Sports app, this Sky Sports login, and you could access fully on board, have the team radio, and if you're on Sky Q, Sky Glass, Sky Stream or now, Chris, you interacted quite with the remote control, and that's not great first sector. Lando Norris, I mean, he's already off, and that's lap gone. That's another set of tyres there. Norris under pressure. It was outside track limits there, I believe. And the car was sliding all over the place. First sector wasn't particularly impressive. It was a 25.6. 25.1 is the fastest we've had that first sector. He's then pushing to try and make up for it. He goes off the track, and the consequences there, Martin. A set tire hit, and let's hope he's got a bit of extra fuel in it. He can charge the battery, cool things down a little bit, and yeah, I mean, he'd had several adventures before he got there. Always one of them. And that's the second one. Then a spot were on the top there. And he had to steer into the slide, which took him off the track, like the went through the gravel. So let's see if he'll regroup and go again. It needs to, doesn't it? Well, that's the problem, because he never got layered fifth fuel off course, which, compared to that first sector, it looks likely that he might have. Yeah. I need to play it instantly dead. I think that single tie goes out on, I'd be amazed, although one time he might think it, but another new set of tires on Lando's car. But you might have to go with the old set. You hear me think about that. And just to remind you, it's not going again, but it does have the fuel. But Max did a time for P2, just to remind you, 65,000 seconds off the first last time on the reused tires. So it's okay. The tires okay for that. Is this a push lap on the tires significantly cooler? Anyways, not as cool as he'd like, but it's a push lap. It's got to get a time on the board. And it's a little bit more this time. The previous lap was a little bit wary. And takes next curve in a ultra tight here in line. And then where another driver has been struggling to get the front thanks to Leclerc and everywhere. And to right on the 12 hard, pulling them twice and early. The heads up down the straight, you can open the DRS, of course, in qualifying in the zones. You won't have to be within a second if somebody else. That's the last thing you need to do, really. But they're free in qualifying. So, nice apex at 12, nice-ish. And it is a carry good speed through this technical. They're finally glad of the lap. And this one's coming together somewhat more nicely. But Lando Norris, that wide sweep in. And now you've got the quadruple apex. And he's pinched in there a little bit on his way on the way in. He couldn't take a nice sweeping line in there with the Red Bull in the way. And then it's just arrived and dried into that turn 19. Don't get too greedy. That was Lando's advice to me, wasn't it, on our track guide in the final corner. Goes over the line and so that's a 1:33.8 for Lando Norris. Currently, 1:34.5 gets you through, but we're all cheering up on the insides to come back out and put the pressure on here. Piastri has stayed out to do another full lap before one more push lap, and he's only 6th fastest, the championship leader. And the team McLaren separated by only 3/100ths of a second. Charles Leclerc with fastest time so far at 1:33.5, and the bottom 5 on Raja, and he won't be going out again. Also, Exo Albon on the pit, so had Stroll as a 5-place grid penalty wherever he finishes. If it was Q2, you'd say Leclerc would be super nervous, but only forward in the drop out now with that jar already out. So it should, in theory, be okay. Happy evolution. will come into play. Track temperature starting to fall just a little bit. We're what, 25 past 4 in the afternoon here. The sun's starting to sink just a little bit here. So all sorts of things to contend with here. And negotiating 20 corners, a nice 3 newbies for George Russell. So, newbie not this current 8th place. All leaves through the exit, being, and it moves to one of them speakers there. Yeah, 2 poles so far this season. The George Russell rest starting near 4th in 2022. He goes to the top around the cycle charts and almost the green stage. Savoda, 134.2 on the board, to do with at least another personal best through this final sector, and to try and put some distance between himself and the bottom 5, with this might be the lap that has to count for Yuki Tsunoda, and he goes the fastest one, 1:33 right now. He's been right by McLaren, so actually music to those supporting the Papaya, but he's not enough for Yuki Tsunoda. So then he crosses the line, goes second fastest behind his teammate. Yeah, it'll certainly relax the McLaren pit wall a little bit. It's going to happen to Kimi and severely. Yeah, I'm going to always stay on top of the hill, dropping his way through that nicely cut across 10. It's alright, you see? But it's alright, effective, industrious, shall we say, for Kimi Antonelli. Meanwhile, muscling his way down that back straight, backs for step, 25 more. Oh, the first sector had been worried, but on his previous best time, but doesn't breathe. Through the middle part of the lap, still one number with George Russell here, but they're all thereabouts. We know the pass is pretty good in the final sector and can make up the time. And there are green personal best times being set all the way through the timing screens at the moment. We've got 19 cars on track and everyone going for it as we reach the end of this first part of qualifying. Verstappen rounds the final corner, crosses the line, goes quickest by a 10. George Russell final sector. They absolutely aced it. Did you doubt it? On board with Gabriel Portoletto now. First visit at Single Austin Press US Grand Prix here. Having 20th of last without setting a time. It's sprint qualifying. Meanwhile, fellow rookie Ali Behrman goes fastest. Once again behind the McLaren, but ahead of Tsunoda. On the third, leads up, gets to 5th place. Tsunoda is down in 12, where there are even more green sectors being set. Below Yuki Tsunoda, Gabriel Portoletto's got a couple of them. Is this going to be good enough to jump the Red Bull, though it's not only 14 for the Sauber driver? Indeed, sir, with the McLaren just stealing triangle, and midstream is on another lap, no, 9th and 10th now. Well, McLaren's, I think they're going to be okay here, aren't they? But it's going to be touch and go, and yes, they could put a better lap in. Liam Lawson's out of qualifying, only 17th for him. Lance Stroll moved up into 11th place, but she's still Oda down in the 13th. I mentioned that Connor Pinto's out qualified Pierre Gasly. In the last 2 races, he's a couple of tenths down on Gasly on this lap. Carlos Sainz is absolutely aced the first sector. Wilson slammed into bed fastest. He managed to complete his lap. Apologies for that, Liam Lawson, Brad. And he is cycling through Gasly. Will be cycling through it. 7th, Tsunoda down to 14th. Checker Black is 5 now. And Pinto get itself out of qualifying. And come on, get itself out of qualifying. Pinto does, but